and thank you for tuning in to my podcast, Off the Rails. This is episode 17, and I have a very exciting guest calling in from South Korea today, Noah. I'm super happy to have you. Noah, morning for me, but obviously it's early afternoon for you. How's your day been so far?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm really excited to talk about a lot of things. And yeah, I'm doing great. And the weather's looking a bit cloudy, but still sunshine bit.
Yeah. So just before we hit record on the podcast, Noah and I were exchanging the woes of the humidity this summer. So me in Portugal and you where you are, and it's kind of like, yeah, the humidity is no good on a very female basis. The hair kind of gets bigger every second. So yeah, it's definitely a humid summer here. So just to kind of give everybody that's listening and tuning in today a bit of a background about the brief and what we're going to be talking about. Noah and I met each other through a mentorship platform, actually, a couple of weeks back. And we were discussing all things fashion, kind of boutiques, how to elevate, how to promote certain brands and bring them kind of a little bit more international. So I love the conversation we had, hence why it's brought us here today. And what I'd love to share with everybody is not only your business and what it is, your intent is, the journey of how you got here today, but also a little bit around, you know, the ups, the downs, the in-betweens of life as a business owner and trying to get your ambition and your dream and make it a reality.
Yeah.
So that is our goal for today. So I think let's kick off with telling me a little bit about where you're from and that journey of who you are a little bit. Let's get a feeling of you, Noah, what you're about, what you like, and where you are today. What led you to, this ambition you have?
Yeah, well, first of all, my name is Noah and I'm 27 years old. So I'm actually Korean American. I was born in the States, but I moved to Korea when I was 5 years old, which is completely the opposite of a lot of other Koreans. So
Yeah.
I've been living in Korea for a long time and I still identify myself as Korean American. So throughout my whole time in Korea, I had a lot of opportunities to experience different industries because I guess my parents really pushed me to try out various types of, I guess, ideas, hobbies. They really pushed forward that and they never really forced me to study. So I always had an overwhelming pressure of like, I should definitely find something and not only just play around, but really decide what I should do for my future. And so I guess my whole upbringing has been very open compared to, I guess, other Koreans in South Korea. And I guess what led me to kind of fashion is just, I always had interest in clothes after high school because of music. And then when I started listening to music, I seen what the singers or kind of hip hop artists are wearing, and I really wanted to kind of copy similar styles in high school. So I went to a fashion academy, study women's wear, and I did that for about a year. So I really wanted to become a women's kind of wear fashion designer back when I was in college, but I decided to stop that and I just got a degree in econ and just kind of went the typical route. But then I came back to fashion because I just think that I can never escape from that. So that's pretty much what I'm doing right now, related to fashion, business related to fashion. Yeah.
That's cool. And it's, yes, I think I also, and that's kind of why we connected, is the fashion has been our foundation of where we've met to exchange experiences and so forth. And I think you're right. If there's something that you always have this burning desire for, it'll always pull you back if it's meant to be. So you tried a different route, like you said, but there was just this kind of burning desire of this is what I'm passionate about. And fashion is such a big area. You can take so many different routes, media, marketing, design, manufacturing, production, all these different realms, photography, everything. There's so much in the world of fashion. So yeah, you had a very kind of, let's say, a nice open door to explore what you wanted. You did that. You kind of dipped your toe in what you felt was, something that you're interested in. So tell us about where you are now, like you've done the studying, you've looked at fashion, you've enjoyed it. How did that bring you to what you're working on today?
Yeah, so actually before I started this business related to fashion, it's only been I would say less than 2 months. And before that, I was working on a platform in South Korea where we were helping graphic designers or art designers in general get jobs in South Korea. So I've been working on that for 2 years. However, we missed the mark in terms of how many people needed it because it's fairly a traditional market, and design is a little bit harder to kind of cross platforms in terms of industry standards or kind of career patterns. The same things that you have in Korea might not resonate with users, let's say in Japan or US, because there are different industry standards. So it was very difficult to see how we could expand upon that outside of South Korea. But in terms of fashion, I think it's easier to display because it's physical. And if there's a good product, then I think that really translates and resonates to a lot of people, no matter where you are in the world. So that's kind of like why I came back to fashion, because I really think myself as a global person. And I just think that my last business was just too locally centric and couldn't really escape this kind of atmosphere of just being in a small country and not being able to go outside and expand.
Yeah, I think that's
I,
key as well, because there is this kind of I think historically there was more gray areas, and people, like, there were standards, there were cultural differences that we weren't as exposed to. And I think the benefit of social media kind of crosses those borders in a much
yeah,
more easier way for us to translate and understand a little bit more. Of course, we don't know everything, the ins and the outs, but we kind of get to touch and feel different areas of the world much easier than what
yeah,
we ever used to,
yeah,
because of
definitely.
social media, for sure. And of course, you have this this connection yourself, having been born in the US and having that kind of background. You understand somewhat the infusion and also the opportunity of bringing, you know, the
Mhm.
platform closer together. So tell me more about the actual business, the objective. What is it
Oh,
you set out to do with your business exactly?
yeah, so our business is, I think it's quite simple, where we think there are a lot of brands in South Korea or just generally around the world that really have a good story. But it's quite unfortunate that a lot of these brands will not be able to penetrate different markets because they don't speak the language or they don't fully understand the culture from, let's say, South Korea to Germany. There's going to be huge language barriers. However, if you're quite a global person, or you know how to speak English, or you understand how the world kind of functions, it's kind of second nature. For example, for myself, like I could come up with a few ideas of how we could bring a South Korean brand to the UK. So what we're trying to do right now is kind of eliminate that barrier or that border, kind of cross borders in terms of culture. And we're kind of a platform where we can gather really good brands from around the world and help them expand abroad by getting them into boutique stores or retail stores that they dream of going into. And so they can focus more on their business, their brand, while we take care of more of the communication and logistics sides of kind of the clothing industry. So we're just helping them go abroad pretty much.
Yeah, so it's like bridging the gap, which I think is a huge struggle everywhere. Is, again, that kind of, yeah, we know a certain amount about different cultures, but there's a lot around within the fashion realm of body type. You know,
Yes.
might fit somebody in your culture, for example. You bring
Yes.
that to, yeah, let's go. You mentioned Germany, completely different body type,
Yep.
usually quite tall people,
Oh,
different
yep.
structure, and, you know, completely different.
Exactly.
So when you want to expand into another territory, um, there's a lot to think about, not only language, not only about
Mhm.
understanding what's trending, because, yeah, there's a general global trend that usually translates anywhere. However, then it's the size and the fit and what's culturally appropriate as well.
Of
I know
course.
there's the extremities due to religion and things like that, but there's also what might look great in your area versus what's good in with me or my area. Is like, oh wow, those things just don't translate the way I thought they would. But equally, then there's this niche area that I think is super cool, like things that I can't seem to get or touch, like you're saying, South Korean brands in particular, where I go into bigger platforms. I'm like, I'd love to be able to buy that, but they don't ship to my territory. So, you know, the barriers put up. So somebody like yourself that's trying to, you know, crack through those walls, those invisible walls, as it were. I think that's really interesting because I think you and I discussed actually a couple of weeks ago how flooded the market is with Me Too's, I'll call them. So in the UK, it's very much fast fashion. It's very much a certain genre, a certain type of consumer that is catered for in the mass. So when you look for something a little bit different, it's hard. So I think trying to do what you're doing is brilliant. And I really, really like champion what you're doing because I, for one, love fashion. And I really want to see newness. I want to see something different on the market. So when you're bringing these brands, ultimately making them more accessible, that is great. I think that is like amazing. So understand the objective. Talk to me a little bit about, you know, are you solo on this project? Have you got people that help? And if you do, what does it look like? What's everybody's kind of role within this project?
Yeah, so right now, because of my past project that I worked for 2 years, I still have about 4 to 5 programmers that are able to build systems and websites, but they're not really interested in fashion, but they weren't really familiar with design either. So thankfully, it doesn't matter which industry we choose, as long as we can communicate what needs to be built in terms of a technical standpoint, they're all up for it. So for me personally, I try to first create the structure of the entire business, how we can get our first customers and how we can get connected to, I guess, external clients. And then I just relay that back to my programmer saying that I think we need this kind of tool that's custom made to boost efficiency so I can contact 100 people more or contact 300 boutique stores more. So that's kind of like the system. So on the business side and more of the management side, I take care of all of that. But all of the technology side, I just give ideas and then they construct it and I give them feedback and we just reiterate and then just keep on going. So yeah, I think it's a kind of a unique team, I guess, atmosphere and yeah, kind of collaboration at the moment.
Yeah, but that's what keeps it kind of fun too, because I think when there is a team of people that are too like-minded, you know, you're kind of fighting for, you know, the same idea, but kind of butting heads.
True.
Whereas if
That's
you've got
true.
different skill sets, you can elevate each other. I know sometimes it's kind of, there's pros and cons with it because it's like, but you don't understand the product, and understanding the product is everything. And I've worked, for example, in cases like this where I've worked for a platform where, you know, it's technology first and then fashion later, and you're kind of like, okay. And I couldn't translate it for a long time because I was so into the product. You know, and it's going back quite some time now, but you know, with fashion, it's all about look and feel and how does the product sit on the body. But in fact, the world has changed so dramatically that when it comes to the product, you know, I don't know the actual statistics, but I would imagine it's marginally higher that people buy products on an e-commerce platform. Therefore, the fabric and the flow and the touch is less important to the mass. Of course, to some, they still prefer the experience of shopping, you know, in a store. However, the mass audience, you know, will buy online. So going back to your point of having people in your team that are really, really, you know, technically advanced and have that information is, yeah, it's key to infuse the two to make, you know, a successful kind of flow, which I think is great.
That makes, yeah, so actually, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So you take on kind of, let's say, the strategic role, the direction, pitching in, okay, this is what I'm looking for. the people you work with, kind of execute that. You come back to the table, understand what's gone right, what's gone wrong, and then go again, because that's business. So talk to me a little bit about, have you got an example where it's been tough as a young entrepreneur that is getting people on board? You're having to pitch your ideas, have people believe in your ideas, because I think this is a good example for anybody listening. You're working as somebody that's passionate about fashion. You have this very, I would say, quite clear goal of what you're trying to do. And then you're working with people that are quite IT minded. So, the programmers, all of this. How do you translate that communication? And how is it difficult? Has there been some points where you're like, okay, deep breath, let me try again,
Yeah, I think thankfully, one thing that I believe I'm not too bad at is kind of understanding people. I would say like my IQ is not high, but I would say my EQ is a little bit above average, I would assume, because I never ever asked anyone to join. I don't believe in that, but I tell them the idea and they want to join. So I have never paid anyone. I have never said that this is the money that I can give. We have no money, but I always told them that, why are we thinking about money? Why are we thinking about percentages? Why are we thinking about all of this when we don't even have a product out? But one thing that I can guarantee is that if you trust me and believe me, then I will give percentages of the company to everyone who deserves it. And I guess with that kind of philosophy and there's kind of like that thinking, that they really understood what I was trying to say. And they just kind of have faith in, I guess, the kindness of that I will deliver on promises. And I guess one big thing as well is kind of, I try to work like 7 days a week. And if they see the person who's giving the ideas working really hard every day, like let's say 10 or 12 hours a day for 7 days straight, then I guess it builds a sense of trust, even though it's not monetary, but they can see through time and emotion. And even as a mid-20s to late 20s, it's a kind of crucial part of your career, but you're making a career sacrifice trying to make something else work. So it's not only just being talking about dreaming, it's more about actually going down to the fields and actually working, and they can see it. And I think that really built a sense of trust. But in general, it's not always like sunshines and rainbow every day, right? There's a lot of things that we might disagree upon in terms of like technology or business. I guess for a lot of like IT people, they love to create in terms of, we want to build this, we want to build that, but sometimes you have to tell them to stop, saying we have customers, we don't even understand if this is the product they want. We could spend 6 months building it, but if nobody's gonna use it, then we just wasted 6 months. And I think that was one of the hardest things, just to kind of communicate with IT related people. They just really want to build something, but in a business standpoint, it's more of like, we will build it if there's demand for it. And I think that's kind of sometimes really hard to translate in general. So that's kind of like what we struggled with in the past.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that you've said. So let me try and unpack on that.
Oh, sorry.
I think, no, in a positive way, for sure, in a positive way. So I think a couple of things that I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper is trust and no salary. So two things that a lot of people might be red flag. How do you do something when you're not paying anybody? So it is hard, but as a startup, it's exactly that. You're starting up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, yes, you may come from a background where you have a huge investment and you're starting with funding, or you have investors. But there's also the side of the coin, which we don't often talk about, is what I would call a true startup. I've got a belief, I've got an ambition, and my objective is to do this, and I have a clean slate. The clean slate means I have nothing apart from me, myself, people that believe in me, and a computer in front of me, and a lot of will to keep going. Like you said, right now, there's a massive investment from your side of time, effort, and building the trust in yourself to keep going, but also the trust in others to believe in you, to support and work as that team. There's a lot in that can't be taken for granted. So you've obviously, like you said, you've got this very empathetic way, this understanding people. And luckily for you, it's work that, you know, you're bringing them on your journey to be a part of it, you know, and
Yeah.
that the ambition is, look, if this is successful, this is your success as well as mine. And I think
Yes, that's important. Yeah.
that's 100%. So I love to hear that. And it's unique because a lot of people, like I say, without funding and without a salary, it's very hard to get people on your train, let's call it that, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, hats off for you to be able to do that. It's an immense achievement already. And then you did talk a little bit about, you know, the investment of time from yourself. How do you work on that? So there's lots of things that are being spoken about right now, and this is one thing that, as you know, a business owner that you're starting off, I know it as well. Your day isn't a 9 to 5. Your day isn't whatever timing that the average office is. You know, I can work sometimes very early in the morning and I finish at 4. But then depending on who I deal with, I have a lot of clients in the US and Canada. I might have to get on again at 7, 8 at night and do a couple more emails in the evening. So no day looks the same for everybody.
Yeah.
But I want to kind of tap into what you said with working so many hours and so many days a week. How do you manage that from, you know, getting back to a bit of being raw? Like, how do you keep momentum? How do you keep yourself fresh? Because it's a lot, you know, given that many hours. How do you keep yourself motivated?
Yeah. Yeah, just like a disclaimer, not every day, as you mentioned, what I love that you said is not every day is the same. I might be pushing 12 hours, I might be pushing 6 hours. It really depends on like how I feel. And one thing that I kind of learned in general, like trying working by myself or working, not having like a boss or anything, is number one is you need to be very motivated on what you're doing. Number two, you have to have a lot of dedication and self kind of motivation, self-dedication, and management, because nobody's telling you what to do. And so your effort and your input equals the outcome of what the business is going to turn out. So I honestly kind of think that at the same time, it's also important to understand yourself, because that 12 hours of you not working is not going to destroy the business. You might feel like, oh, every single hour counts. That's true. But at the same time, it's not, because one day of work is not going to have a huge impact in your over grand scheme of your entire business. So I kind of disagree with a lot of kind of tech founders saying you have to work every single day, work super long hours. I don't think that's true, because how much impact can one day really have? So just generally, it's just passion and motivation. Just seeing, if you get bored of something, you move to the other part that needs to be addressed in your business, start doing that, and then you might suddenly think of a solution on part A that you were just kind of getting bored of, and you just really bounce back and forth. So I think that's pretty much kind of how I manage this whole project, I would say.
And I think that's great that you're so honest about it. Yeah, one day might be a 12-hour day, and the next day might be, you know what, I'm going to do 2 hours, I'm going to check my emails, and I need some time out. Because as creative people, you need the time to be creative, and it doesn't always come sitting at a laptop. You know, it won't come to you. You have to sometimes go out and find it. And everybody has their release. For me, it's either going to the gym and doing a spin class for 30 minutes. That's it. And I'll feel 100 times better. Or I take my dog for a walk and I'm like, I needed that so much.
Yeah, I agree.
Or watching crap binge TV, like something really crap on Netflix. And I'm like, I just needed that, like, the outlet to, like, you know, decompress. So what is it for you, like, just on like more of a social thing? What is it you do to decompress? Is it a walk? Is it a day off? Is it going out for drinks? Like, what is your downtime look like?
Yeah, so I like to I run almost, maybe like, I try to run every day, but the weather's hot, so I've been only running maybe 4 or 5 times a week. But I think that really helps me in terms of staying tuned in nature, or kind of watching videos related to history or kind of technology. Because one thing I would say for sure is that when founders or business owners say you work 24 hours, it's true in a sense of not physically doing it, but you're always thinking about your business. So even if you watch something so mundane or something so stupid, there might be a scene they talk about something, you're like, okay, wow, wait, that could be start of something to help my business as well. Even though it's such a dumb idea, you kind of formulate the situation. So for me, it's just literally just doing anything that is slightly related to the business, but not really related to the business, just to make me always think. I think that's the kind of main way how I decompress. Just anything really random, whether it's going on a walk, watching a TV show, or just going to a different station in Seoul, going somewhere random, looking at people, what they're buying at the store, going to a clothing store, just anything. And it just helps you a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's something I actually, now you've just said it, I was like, I could do the day in the city, because I love that. Like nothing more inspiring than sitting, a drink of your choice, whether it's a coffee or a cocktail, whatever it may be, and just people watching is something that I love. How people curate their own outfits, because that's what's great. You know, there's a certain standard that a boutique or a certain brand will put together because they have their ideal customer profile in mind. But there is nothing better than watching an individual that is not afraid to put something really quirky together, maybe a couture dress with a pair of vintage shoes.
Yeah.
I don't know, something that you're like, oh,
yeah,
wow,
something.
wow. And it just kind of gives you that, oh my God, this is why I love what I do. You know, sometimes you have a bad day and I just need to get out of the house. I need to go and decompress. And you'll, like you say, you'll do something and it relates back to giving you kind of that reassurance of, this is why I do what I do.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I think when you have that kind of that moment, because when you do work alone or you work in a small team, you don't have, like you mentioned before, you don't have that boss or that manager to say, you know, we need to be doing this, we should be looking at this, you know, and somebody to keep you going. It's this, you mentioned it as well, this self-motivation, the self-dedication. And also one thing is self-discipline, and whether that's getting up every day and actually doing your work, or being disciplined enough to take some time out to do what we've just mentioned, you know, reconnecting with what you love and giving yourself a little bit of, brain time to actually relax, but also become more creative again. I think those.
Yeah, self-discipline. No, there's actually kind of one more thing I want to add on that is, listen to your body, whether it's physically or mentally. If thoughts and ideas are not coming out, just stop. Like I personally believe you're wasting your time sitting in front of a computer for 3 or 4 hours. Do not do that. Do something else or walk, because I think inspiration is not something that comes automatically. You have to find it and then it comes to you. And I think a 30-minute walk could get you focused back into your computer, what you have to do for 3 hours. So I'm a strong advocate for that. Stop and then really just take a break, listen to your body.
Yeah, I would be exactly the same. If I'm not in the moment, whether it's feeling fresh, feeling creative, feeling, you know, inspired, I could sit at a computer and it would take me maybe 3 hours to get out the 10 minutes information block that I need. Whereas if I just leave my computer, okay, this is not working, I'm okay with that, go out, and either it's the 30 minutes or it's, in fact, you know what, this is a tomorrow job because I'm too tired, I can't focus. And I think that's what's great, you know, about being a business owner, because I remember being back in, you know, working for a corporate, and you need to sit at your desk from 9 till 6. And for me, it's that 4 o'clock. That 4 o'clock is magic for me. It's like, I'm done. My head can't take anymore. Maybe
4.
4 p.m. Yeah.
Okay, me too. It's 4. For some reason, 4.
I don't know what it is. At 4 p.m. I'm like,
don't know. Yeah.
Switches off, and I'm just like, I could sit for an extra 2 hours, but my output in those 2 hours it's useless. And the old me would have sat there for 2 hours and been like, okay, I'll scan this, I'll look at this, I'll write an email. And then maybe I'd read back the email and I'm like, that didn't make any sense. Why did I bother doing that? Now I've got to go back and rewrite that and resend it. So like you say, I think that discipline and also that freedom of not having to like clock watch in a corporate where somebody's like, you're not finished until 6. You're like, come on, I'm physically and mentally done for the day. I think that's so cool. And I think there is a lot of corporates that are becoming more and more, you know, a little bit more agile, and people have better working hours and things like this. And I think for creatives, this is like a godsend.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, this is what we needed all along. So completely agree with that. So tell me a little bit about the brands that inspire you. So like we've heard about your journey, what you love, your ambition, how you've kind of went out, did something else, come back, fashion's where you're at, how you got people to believe in your journey, how that's working, the kind of the ups, the downs. If we speak about the brands that you're approaching, what do they look like? What is, you know, when you're scanning through brands, what is it that attracts you to those brands? What's their kind of like specialty that you're like, oh, that's a brand that I definitely want to support? Is it a look? Is it a feel? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So I think I think that's kind of like the beauty of kind of design and creatives, is that there's no special formula, and you kind of create your own formula of how you want to do a checklist. So for me, it's first off all checking Instagram, because that obviously means this person is in tune with kind of modern society and able to kind of churn out content that could be relatable across the world. And the next thing I'll look at is the design of the product. It's more of like, would I wear it or would someone I know wear it? And if I don't really see that happening, I don't really want to contact them, not because it's bad, it's because I won't be able to relate to it. And I'm forcing myself to understand it. Yeah.
I really like that. It's what was in my head. It's like the relatability, because you can't translate then what they're thinking. Yeah, I really like that. That's cool.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And if I can't see anyone around my circle wearing it, then how am I going to be the person to vouch for your product or your brand? And so that's very difficult. And then the next thing, well, we have a checklist, and the next thing we would like to do is we like to interview the brand owner themselves and really understand what kind of person they are. How far do they see their brand? Are they doing it for money? If they're doing it for money, that's totally fine, but that's not for us. We're looking for brands that really push the culture of fashion to the next generation or to the next frontier, because I think there are a lot of brands out there that really believe in their product and brand owners that really want to elevate the fashion of culture. And so we like to target those types of people. And also, with that being said, kind of the manufacturing process is really important as well, because if we try to bring them across, are they able to fulfill orders? If a store in Canada is looking for 200 pieces, even though I love who you are and what your product is, if I'm getting an order form for 200 t-shirts, are you able to fulfill it? If you cannot, then that's going to be a bit difficult, because that puts a strain on the boutique, because now they have to wait or they have to find another brand, and that looks bad for us in terms of a business. So I guess those are the main things that we pretty much look at. Yeah.
Yeah. And
simplified.
Yeah, but there's a lot in that again, because it's like, okay, what am I passionate about? What can I relate? Because you're the tone of voice, essentially, you know, to pivot the brand from where they are to where they want and need to go, and where also you can envisage them going to. And then also the third part of that is, you know, is the brand capable of scaling? Because most brands want to scale, but do they understand it from a business perspective? And there's two different things. There's having that ambition and the dream and the nice poetic side of things, but then there's the reality of, look, if you want this to be a business, are you set up in X, Y, and Z to make sure it can happen, you know? So I think all those things are incredibly important as a foundation of belief, understanding and translating, and the creative side, and then also this business side of, is it actually possible? Is what you have in your mind scalable and possible to take to the next level?
I think also a lot of, when I talked about this idea or business, a lot of people say, oh, that's great because like South Korean culture is getting popular, but I strongly advise against that. I think it's very harmful if I would bring brands saying like, oh, it's from Korea and Korean culture is popular. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, because later down the line, if Korean culture fades out, then how do people look at the product, or how do they look at the brand? The brand just becomes the brand, and there's no more cultural backing from a nation in terms of like Korea or K-pop or anything related to Korean kind of, again, culture. So that's really detrimental in terms of finding brands in South Korea, because I think South Korea is now a little bit on the world stage, but you really have to look at the brands for what it is as itself, not because of it's from Korea. And I have to find the right balance of Korean culture and the brand value. So it really needs to be identified well. So I think that's kind of one kind of problems that I'm facing at the moment, really being objective.
Yeah, I get that actually. Yeah, it's really interesting you touch on that, because there can be a hype. There's a hype behind a lot of things. And like you say, there's this world stage that right now, potentially the South Korean brands are kind of, riding on this wave. However, once that wave kind of settled, okay, what do we do now? And is the longevity in the brand? Is there something, as well as being culturally really adaptable and having that recognition as something that people want? Is there different kind of stems to the brand that will also take it further and have the longevity that a brand needs? Yeah, definitely. So are you looking, tell me a little bit about, because I'm quite out of the loop, I have to be honest, but what is it about the brands that you think is something different that, would translate into the Canadian market or the US market or the UK market? What is it that they have that isn't maybe in those markets right now that you think, okay, this is why they would be successful?
So just to kind of understand the question again, it's what if I'm bringing brands from like Asia to Canada, why, or to like US, why do I think some of these brands could potentially work?
Exactly, yeah.
Hard
question, but I think it's interesting because the reason why I asked this, and kind of, to kind of cement what I'm saying is, there is often, like we've said, and the whole purpose of what you're doing is to bring brands from what you're familiar with into, I guess, more of like a Western platform. But what is it that, say, for example, I'm in front of you right now, and you're saying, well, look, there's these brands are underpenetrated in the Western world, and they can bring X, Y, and Z. What is it that would make me want to buy them? What's so different that I can't already get,
Yeah, I think I like that question a lot, because it's also a thing that I'm very objective in terms of, as you said, if a store in like Vancouver, Canada wants to bring a South Korean brand versus something down the street, well, that brand from South Korea, it doesn't matter if it's from South Korea. If the brand from down the street in Vancouver, which is 20 minutes away, is better, then it doesn't make any financial sense to bring something across the world. But I think this is quite different between Asia and Western nations, is that I might get hated for this comment, but a lot of fashion and just the baseline, the guideline is made by Western cultures. So, like if you see clothes today in South Korea, they use a lot of Western models, because it gives like an image of elevating the brand. It's almost like, why do people do fashion shows in Paris? It's because once it's in Paris or it's in France, then the value of the brand goes up. And I think Asia still kind of has that perception that if you put a Western model, then you're viewed as a Western brand. And that's just really how it is. People might say that's not true, but when I live here and I see a lot of upcoming brands, one thing that is prevalent is kind of half Korean and half white models, or just fully white models wearing Asian clothes, or Asian influenced or Western influenced Asian clothes. So when it comes to like bringing brands and what I think that could work in Canada or US, it's not as hard to translate because a lot of these brands in South Korea or maybe in Japan are already catered, already has the foundation or the fundamentals of Western fitting or Western styles or Western influences already embedded in them, with a bit of Asian taste for their perception as an Asian designer of how they view Western clothing. That's just my opinion, of course, but that's why I think it's a little bit easier for Asian brands to go to Western countries because it's already infused with Western thinking. Yeah, it's a very complex answer, I guess, of it.
No, but it makes complete sense. And there's kind of positives in that with regards to the somewhat of the gap is already bridged because physically you're already trying to tap into that audience because it's about recognition, isn't it? Everybody likes to see how they would perceive a brand. Okay, I can imagine myself in that because the model represents somewhat of me, in whatever way. And of course it's aspirational because a model is a model and the average person is not a model. But I get what you're saying. I think I know from that side of things, it's very apparent that Asia has thought about that and kind of, okay, we already know how to translate and kind of gain that audience because we know how to speak physically their language, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
But equally, quite in a way, a little bit sad that, the Asian brands have to use a white model. You know what I mean? It's kind of like it would be nice if it would translate the other way. But yeah, that's the world we live in. That's a whole other topic that we try and fight every day. But it would be nice to be able to see, an Asian brand use Asian models and for the Western world to just be able to translate that because the Western world expects that the other way around, so, but I completely get where you're coming from, but yes, it's there's a lot of layers to that as well.
I guess in terms of like my perspective, I don't really mind it. It's just, I don't know, like I don't want to sound like I'm like stereotypes are bad or like these discriminations bad. I'm not giving any opinions on that, but I just think there are certain things where it's just been so embedded into tradition and cultures that it's kind of expected. Like cars have 4 wheels, but when there's 3 wheels, it looks a little bit odd. And I think that's kind of like the culture of Asia. It's as I said, fashion and Western fashion is very heavily influenced. So I do understand why they use white models and not Asian models. And it's just kind of following the industry. In my opinion, it's just following the industry standard. That's what I think, because if they're going to bring it overseas into the Western market, which they all want to, in the Western market, there's more, Caucasians rather than Asians. So if they're looking at that, then that makes sense. But there are Korean brands that only focus domestically that do Korean people or Asian people. But again, a lot of people want to go to the Western world, so they prepare beforehand. And I understand. I'm not against them. I just, like I said, I have no opinion on that. It's an observation.
I get completely what you mean. Yeah, and it's true. It's like you want, like we've just said, it's having that aspiration and being able to actually see yourself in something. It's like, okay, now I can relate because of X, Y, and Z. But it's an interesting, and it's like sometimes you ask a question and it's like, okay, there's so much more to that question. My question was, what makes a brand in Korea or anywhere in Asia, translatable or different or acceptable? And it's like, okay, it's down to how they almost mold themselves at the start and how they make themselves a little bit more adaptable, because they're not only sticking to one stereotype or anything like that. They're already kind of making themselves a bit more open to different audiences. And I think that, like you said, it is important because they're already setting themselves up for the wider audience, which again, if you want to scale, you know,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
definitely down the right route.
Definitely. It's like
Definitely.
it sounds like a one sentence answer when you hear the question, but yeah, I guess from like Korea and Asia in general, it's different processes. And yeah, like if you look at Chanel, Gucci, or Prada, they could just bring any products they made in Europe and they could import it very easily to Korea because Koreans will buy anything that's European or Western style. But for Asia, there's a lot more, I think, kind of understanding that needs to be done to fit in the Western market, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think yeah, it's a really good point. We could talk about that particular part all day. I think
Yeah,
it's so complex and
it
so
is
many
complex.
different
Yeah.
ways to go with it. And also, I'm obviously having a little
Oh,
visitor. My dog is here. He's probably reminding me he needs feeding or something.
yeah,
But yeah, yeah, so many different
it's a
ways to go
complex
with that.
question. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think last question from me would be, you know, we've talked about the journey, we've talked about kind of the struggles, how to be disciplined, what
Mhm.
makes a brand kind of stand out, and how can you translate a brand from one part of the world to another. And we've touched on that lightly. The last thing I'd want to close with, because I think there's a lot of people that I know that I do consulting with that constantly I want to
Mhm.
change my career or I want to start my own business, but I'm super nervous. What would your kind of bit of advice be for anybody that's listening to this saying, okay, I really want to do something like that, but how do I do it? Is there a right time? When is the right time? What is your kind of one piece of advice for
Mhm.
anybody thinking about that?
I think number one is terms of financials. Like, you have it's it's a really long process. I don't think that if you're trying to explore doing a business, I think you really need to understand it is a marathon. It takes many, many years. It's not quick. And also, I want to say everything looks greener on the other side. Even if you're doing a business, but you see someone else talk about a different business, and you're like, "Wow, that looks amazing. I want to do that as well." It's not. It's going to be just as challenging as what you're doing now, and just focus on things that you believe that you know and you're passionate about, and I think you will find success from that. Make sure you take care of your finances, and you're choosing something to be very passionate about if you're tight on your finances.
I think that's brilliant advice. I think the financial side is incredibly important. Like we spoke about that a little bit earlier. And I think you need some sort of either savings, so plan up front and have something that gets you by day to day, covers your rent and food. Um, but also if there can be something that you could do as a sideline, then definitely think about that as well, because we all know without any financial support, then you know
It's
something is
almost
short-lived,
impossible.
it's impossible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think definitely a lot of people think about that and just like, okay, I'll quit my job and I'm going to start this tomorrow. It's like, okay, but have
Yeah.
you,
No. Yeah. Don't do that.
thought about the
Don't do
transition?
that.
Because it's
Yeah.
not one versus the other. It's very much a transition of the two. And like you say, and the part that I love is remind yourself that it is a marathon and not a sprint, because yeah, it's a long journey. We touched on this throughout this podcast is you hear about these kind of success stories overnight of, oh, you know, I launched my business 2 months ago and I have 1 million followers and I'm doing 6 figures. And it's like, and then there's this kind of misconception of, am I doing something wrong because I've not done that?
No. Yeah.
And to remind yourself that it is exactly that. It's a marathon and not a
Yeah.
sprint. I love that. I think it's so important to keep reminded of
Um,
that.
I guess one last thing I would say is if you're working like a 9 to 5, 5 days a week, I would suggest people starting their weekends, use your weekends to do your research and try to build something up. But if you're not motivated to do that, then I don't think starting a business is for you. Because if you're not willing to even use your free time or times where you really don't have an excuse to not work, then I would strongly advise against it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is really, really key, because when you're passionate about something, you'll do anything to get to
Of
where
course.
you want to be. And like
Exactly.
you say, and some people, I don't have the free time. Make the time. There's
You'll make
always
the
a chance
time.
to make.
Yeah.
You will make the time.
You'll
Yeah,
make the
it's
time.
exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't
So
matter.
I think it comes down to that, the passion and the drive and the
Yeah.
discipline. But I think, yeah, that's completely sound advice. So anybody listening, definitely think about those things and think, is it really what you want? And is it what you want now? Because it's a big commitment once you do leave a paid job to go and
Yeah.
do what you want to do. There is a risk involved. So be
Oh,
aware of the
definitely.
risk and, take that on board. So I have loved speaking to you today. Thank you so much. I really
No,
appreciate it.
thank you for
Um,
having me.
absolutely. I think I will be watching obviously your journey, and any help that I can be. Of course, we'll keep in touch and make sure I see what's happening. I'm super excited. I think it's an amazing topic that you're working on, and I'd love to see more of Korean brands making the waves and making an impact into the Western world. However that happens, then
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll figure it out. So yeah, thank you for today. And for anybody listening, I always forget this part, but please subscribe if you're enjoying these podcasts, and any suggestions of what you'd like to hear more about, then of course let me know. But Noah, thank you so much for today,
No,
and
thank you.
look for this journey. I'm really looking forward to following you. Thank
Thank you for
you.
having me.
Bye bye.
Bye.